Hello and welcome back to the Brain BS podcast. This is Maureen Kafkas, the Brain BS coach, here to tell you about the episode today. So, in this episode, I'm talking to RJ Sturgeon, and we're beginning the first in a series of 5 sessions where we're calling it the RJ experiment. So, RJ has been challenged with some major health issues recently. And I came across him on my journey across America with my dogs, and he volunteered to come on the podcast to be a guinea pig for showing other people how this work can be beneficial, even if you know nothing about it, you've never done anything like it before, just by being open to all the possibilities. So that is what our experiment is. I want to add a disclaimer here to be very clear. This experiment's about how living consciously can benefit you, but it doesn't replace any medical or professional care that you might need. So this is just one approach, and this is to improving your quality of life. But again, if you have health issues, whether they be mental or physical, you should seek a professional and get an opinion and not just rely on the Brain BS podcast. I also just want to add that the sound quality on this podcast on RJ's end can kind of go in and out. So we're going to talk about that and see what we can do. But for this episode, you'll be able to hear everything and still get the message that we want you to get in the podcast. So sit back, settle in. Episode 169 of the Brain BS podcast, the RJ experiment. Do you want more out of your life, but not exactly sure what that might be? Are you longing for something, but can't quite put your finger on what it is? That is the universe speaking to you, and it is time to listen up. I'm your host, Maureen Kafkas, the Brain BS coach. I created the Brain BS podcast to help people define what success means to them and show them how to get it. I help you to let go of fear and doubt and prepare your nervous system for success. I show you how to understand your own energy and to trust yourself to make all the decisions. If you are ready to go inward and stop looking outside yourself for all the answers, this is the podcast for you. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Brain BS podcast. This is the first episode of what I'm calling the RJ experiment. And we are going to be talking with RJ Sturgeon, who's a fellow Northsider, who I haven't seen since graduation from high school or something like that. It's been a very long time. And I ran into him recently, and we'll kind of tell you about all that. But he was willing to come on the podcast as an experiment to see how this work I do can help him. And I before we talk to RJ and he introduces himself and tells you what we're going to be talking about and why, I want to introduce this concept. It's called the life wheel, that has different areas of your life that you look at that you rate as either 10 amazing or 1 terrible. And then it gives you an idea of, if you decided to come on the podcast and do an experiment with me, what area you might want to focus on. So the areas are family, their career/business, money, fun and leisure, health and wellness, spirituality, community, and grief. Those are the areas, but I'm also open to other topics, but to give you an idea of how what we're doing here, it will be the same process in a different area of life. So the process is the same when it comes to living consciously. So RJ has decided that we're going to focus on health and wellness in his experiment, and the experiment's going to go over 5 weeks. We're going to do 5 sessions and do updates and follow-ups and see how this work benefits RJ. So RJ, welcome to the Brain BS podcast. We're happy to have you here. Just introduce yourself and tell people why you want to focus on health and wellness.
Thank you, Maureen. My name's RJ Sturgeon, and as Maureen said, I'm a fellow Northside, Youngstown, Ohio guy. Graduated in 1980 and moved out of Youngstown, Ohio in 1980. Moved to California. But health and wellness right now is a subject that I'm dealing with. I'm living in Arizona. So in Arizona, they have a disease called valley fever. Valley fever is a fungal infection in the dirt. So it gets airborne. And basically in beginning of the year, I became sick. I wasn't feeling well, struggling with energy. Thought it was the common cold, took the medication, still couldn't, coughing, some, and then in no, the end of March or beginning of March, I ended up in the emergency room. So with that, they're testing me for valley fever. They come back and say I have pneumonia. Give me all the medications, send me on my way. Um, the results come back. I don't have valley fever. Then it's 2 weeks later. I'm just still down and out. I'm still fighting it. It's the medication isn't working for me, and so I go back to the emergency room. At that point, they've done all the CT scans and X-rays and so forth, and come to the conclusion that they can't figure out what's wrong with me, and they think it's valley fever, but of course I tested negative for it. So they admit me into the hospital. Um, in the hospital, they do finally come to the conclusion that yes, I do have valley fever, which is again a fungal infection in your lungs. It's brutal. It caused me to cough constantly. I mean, a conversation with me would be an hour of, me coughing for 55 minutes and talking for 5 minutes.
Wow, that must have had a huge that because I've been like had bad colds before where it's like that. That's exhausting.
It is. I mean, I, didn't have any energy. I was still trying to, of course, work. I work from my home. Um, I plummeted in weight. I lost 25 pounds. I was down to, 165 pounds, and I looked like I was, you know, cancer stricken, as people would say. So go eat a burger is what. So,
Yeah.
oh, shit.
Yeah, that must
So
have been awful.
it was, but there are things that you learn when you're in the hospital. And in addition to valley fever, they diagnosed me with pulmonary fibrosis. So pulmonary fibrosis is a scarring of the lungs, and basically it's a terminal disease. Um, the there are medications that slow the progression of them, which I'm on a drug called OFEV. Um, Expensive stuff. This stuff costs, $6,000 a month. Thank God I don't pay any of that, due to my insurance, and the manufacturer uh, picks up another $5,000 each month for me to take this medication. But it's one of those medications once you start it, you don't stop it. Um, but anyways, I do have pulmonary fibrosis. In addition to that, I have diabetes, um, and heart issues. Runs in the family, and I'm currently checking out my heart, and have here 3 tests on Monday, or 3 doctor's appointments on Monday for a stress test, echocardiogram, and CT scan. Um,
Well, okay,
oh,
so let me stop you there because
yeah,
all these things that you're talking about, like I worked in a hospital setting for decades.
yeah,
These are things that people find super frustrating and really challenging when their whole life becomes consumed by going to, and it usually happens to people later in life than
yeah,
what's happening to you. And your whole life becomes centered around this illness or these tests that you have to take, and your whole life, like all your calendar is full of these appointments and stuff. Now,
yes.
typically when that happens with people, they can get really frustrated and mad. But what I've noticed when I'm talking with you is you always maintain like a really positive um demeanor when you're talking about it, and kind of laugh when you're talking about all the horrible things associated with what you're going through. So would
I
you say that's a coping skill that you learned a long time ago, or
I think it's more just accept the fact, that I have these diseases. Um, I'm addressing them. I am, you know, working with, the best people I can as far as doctors and getting tests done and running tests and taking medication and doing all of that. But I try not to let it consume me or get me down, should I say, or dwell on it, every minute of the day. um Except sometimes I'm trying to do something, is it's like, all right, I'm not going to run a mile or a marathon anytime soon.
Well, let's be honest, you wouldn't have done that anyway. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that
True
later.
that.
But okay, but doesn't it ever make you mad?
It does, but no,
I think
honestly,
that I think it, and I think that might be because you've lost so many people close to you that you're
yeah,
not thinking like, why me? Because you see that it's happened to family members. I mean, you were with your brother Jimmy,
Jim,
right, when he
yeah.
died, and he die from pulmonary fibrosis, or did he just?
No, Jimmy died from he had diabetes from fourth grade. So what are you, 10, 11, something like that. So he had type 1. I have type 2. Um, but he ultimately, as he got older, he became eligible for a lung, or I'm sorry, kidney pancreas transplant. So he basically had a transplant, both kidney and pancreas. The best thing for him was after the pancreas transplant, he wasn't a diabetic anymore. So
Wow, that's pretty
he loved that.
amazing after as long as he was
Yeah, yeah.
diabetic.
He
Yeah.
was he loved that aspect of it all. But with transplants, uh the life the life of a transplant recipient, yes, it extends your life, but it's not a forever thing. So,
So we
you
should tell
know,
the audience that you're on the list for lung
yeah,
transplant, that that's part of the protocol that you do when you get diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis.
yes, yes. So Jimmy ended up passing away from cancer, lymphatic cancer caused by taking all the anti-rejection medication um, for the kidney and pancreas transplant that he got. But he lasted, over around 10 years. Um, as far as my condition and the pulmonary fibrosis, it does also run in the family. So we have diabetes that runs in the family. My father to my sisters have it. We have heart issues with, my mother and father both dying of heart attacks. My couple sisters have had open heart surgery. Other siblings having heart issues. And I'm trying to figure out, do I have any heart issues? um,
Suffice it to say the gene pool is not,
it's not friendly to us with.
yeah, it's not,
It's
you
not.
didn't hit the lottery with the genetic pool, but
I
you
thought I
did hit the
did.
lottery with your amazing family, so we're not going to discount that. But okay, but why don't you tell the audience, because we talked about this before, like what it was like for you to be in the hospital and not know that you have pulmonary fibrosis and then be told what the doctor told you about it.
Sure. So as I was sitting in the hospital and the doctor comes in and confirms that, hey, we have diagnosed you with I'm sorry, with valley fever. Um, because it takes a number of blood tests for
Mhm.
you to get diagnosed with valley fever. So the first one might fail or negative, then the second one's positive. Um, Anyways, he walks in and he says, all right, we found that you do have valley fever. We've already started you on all the protocols and medications for all that. So that's good. But in addition to the valley fever, you have pulmonary fibrosis and you have 5 to 8 years to live. And so, um, it was shocking, really to hear that, trying to come to terms with that. I didn't talk to anyone, about it for probably a couple months, just because I had to come to terms with it, I guess, myself, you
Yeah,
know,
I can't
and it,
imagine that many. So are you scared?
you know, I, I'm scared of, sure, of how the progression will go. Um, Hopefully the medication, the OFEV will slow the decline. Um, I think, when I went and got a second opinion.
That's
I did,
smart. Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
very
go.
smart. You don't want to take one person's opinion for sure.
Yeah. Um, so, the pulmonologist I have now, is great. I love her. And, she's, there's no number, Maureen, that someone can say, oh yeah, this, looking at this is your, life expectancy 5 to 8 years. If you pull up pulmonary fibrosis, and you know, on the internet or anything like that, yeah, it'll tell you life expectancy 4 to 5 years. My brother John had pulmonary fibrosis, and he died waiting for a lung transplant. Um, he was diagnosed, and within 5 years he was dead. So that 5 to 8 years, even though you don't like to hear it, is it a possibility? Sure, it's a possibility, but it could be long. I'm pushing for longer. Believe me.
That's why we're doing this experiment, right? That's part of it.
Exactly.
We're going to figure out what you can do and how you can show up as the best version of you and how that's
Yes.
going to have an impact on the longevity of your life.
Yes.
And I'm not kidding
Yes.
here. There's science behind what I'm talking about. Like, this is really what I'm hoping for you, that by addressing your spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical health, that you can actually prolong your life and improve the quality of it to the point of which you've never experienced up to this point.
And that's what I like about you, Maureen,
Yeah.
for
Well,
helping me. For,
yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, I'm excited that you're here and that we're doing this. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about when we look at the spiritual. So we know the physical and what
yeah,
you're up against with that. And
yeah,
we're going to talk a little bit more about well, we'll talk about it in a little bit. The mental and the
yes.
emotional and the spiritual. So the spiritual is not something that you've ever really thought that much about, correct? Like,
We all, Youngstown, Ohio, North Side, we all went to St. Edward's Church every, Sunday. And, by the time we were older, we got the bulletin. And here's proof we went to church,
but you
Mom.
didn't
And
actually go
we'd walk in one door, grab the bulletin, and walk out the other
and went
door.
to the Church of McDonald's, right?
And went to the church of, wherever we were just cruising around, by the
All
time we
right,
were
well,
16 and able to
okay,
drive. Anyway, so
yes,
no, I'm really not a spiritual person. I don't practice any religious or spiritual affirmations at this point in my life.
okay, so we're going to be very clear here for the audience that religious and spiritual are two different things. Religious is organized religion where you have to adhere to certain practices and do things a certain way. And it's
Okay.
all like historical and has this whole thing.
Yeah.
Spiritual for me, when I talk to it, and everybody has their own definition of it, like for me, spiritual is more about energy and universal law. So it's about things outside ourselves, like gravity that we can't see, but it's there
Yes. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. And I've experienced it, so I know it's there and I know how to use it in my favor and to work for me to make things a lot easier in my life. And I've learned how to do that by living consciously. So
Yeah.
whether or not you even believe in spirituality, by the end of our 5 sessions, you'll be able to define what it means to you
Okay.
and find and you could use a different word, whatever it is. We're gonna want to address that spiritual part where you have faith and you trust yourself and you trust the process, you trust me and you trust other people, that even when things seem really hard and tough, that it's working in your favor. And if you can continue to trust that, I mean, all of us are going to die at some point, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
but it's how you live the rest of your life,
Yes.
right? And
And
that is going to
yes.
require some sort of faith and trust that everything is available to you and that you actually have some sort of say in how your recovery goes and whether you get a transplant or not. This
And
goes to the mental health. Like, are you expecting to get a transplant, or are you worried you're not going to get a transplant because your brother died before he got one? So it's the thought work is the mental part that we're going to be looking at too, to help you with the expectations that the universe definitely brought us together in Arizona after not seeing each other for so long. So I
yeah.
have to believe that this is happening for you. And also, even the pulmonary fibrosis diagnosis wouldn't have happened if you didn't have valley fever. The
Yeah.
valley fever is what made you aware of that. So maybe getting on the list sooner rather than later is going to make it so that you do get that transplant. So you see how it's all tied together?
I do. I do.
Yeah, so you
Yes.
can't really just address the physical because the mind body connection, there's always an emotion attached to every illness. There's always some kind of programming in your body that is setting you up for that illness. And if we learn to listen to our body much earlier on, we can get the message it's trying to send us until it's screaming at us and we can't avoid it anymore, which is what's happening right now with you.
Yeah. No, the Valley Fever definitely was a screaming match for me.
Yeah,
A coughing match.
yeah.
But yes, I've met with the transplant team here in Arizona, St. Joseph's, my pulmonologist, and again, it's an introductory of transplant team. Here's RJ. RJ. Here's transplant team. I'm not on a transplant list at this point. Um, I'm not to the point where uh, my I need it. So they basically look at it and I have 71% capacity of, you know, breathing capacity. Normal person has about 80%. So it has declined, but not tremendously. To qualify, I would have to have like a 10% decline within 6 months, and I would be on oxygen and, so forth, and many other um, uh, hardships. So I'm not to that point, and hopefully I won't be to that point for many, many, many years. Um, but again, when meeting with the transplant team, a good group of people, but they tell you up front too. It's like, yeah, transplant, 50% are going to die within 5 years. So it's, and then watching Jimmy go through his medical issues of a transplant and dying from cancer after that. And, you
Yeah.
know, so it's like sometimes I do question myself, do I want a transplant? You
Mm,
know,
yeah.
because I mean, they're saying, all right, well, you're going to have, you know, care. You're going to have to live with someone, and Patrick has volunteered. Um,
Oh,
so
that's like, oh my gosh, for sure on one of these episodes, we're going to talk about family and the
yeah,
importance of it because your
yeah,
family is really tight in the way that you take care of one another
no, yeah,
and you're with each other. But that's got to be kind of scary for you because tying this back to the spiritual and the emotional and mental part, it's a lot easier to help other people than it is to receive and to have
uh,
to depend on other people.
yes, or ask other people to, do this for you. Where it's just like, yeah, you're going to be, hospitalized for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You're going to have to come home. You're going to have constant care, you know, and So whether that's a relative or hired help or someone else, my children, um, hopefully again, that won't be for many, many, many years down the road. And I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Exactly. So you bring up another really good point too. The spiritual part is staying present
Yeah,
because you don't have any idea of how this is going to unfold, and you literally can create a miraculous recovery. It is
yeah,
possible. So, or you could really prolong the need for a transplant because you've changed your lifestyle, you've addressed your emotional, spiritual, and mental health needs along with the physical needs and started practicing a little bit better self-care, which is where I'm going to bring up the exercise now. Oh,
okay,
and well, I'm going to bring up the exercise, and I'm also going to bring up that for the audience that they don't know this, but that RJ and I already did another episode. And when we did the episode, we talked about some things and we decided that I texted him because I just had a feeling that something might be bugging him that we talked about. And sure enough, it was. So I decided to just scrap that episode. So I want the audience to know that because I want people to know that if they do come on to do an experiment on the podcast, that I want them to be comfortable and feel like they've been taken care of and that it's a safe space. And if you start stressing afterwards because you talked about something you don't think you should have, I would never post the episode. I will always give you the opportunity to do it over. So we ended up doing that, which I always ends up being the best thing because I love the way we're doing it now. But the
yeah.
one thing that we talked about is that RJ is a little bit sedentary and he's not really in to exercising. And so when we did the last episode, which was like on Wednesday, and it's Saturday now that I'm recording this, he agreed to walk 30 minutes a day, to start walking 30 minutes a day after not doing it. So I want to talk to him a little bit about, first of all, why he was not, I know this, but you don't, why he was sedentary before, and then why he agreed to do what he did and is he doing it?
Um, so why was I sedentary before? Because it's the easy thing to do. It's, it's not doing anything, right? You know, Maureen asked me one question, and why don't you exercise? And I said because of my couch. And it was just, but I mean, yeah, I played sports when I was a kid and was involved in the children's, coaching their schools and teams and everything like that. I'm not a gym rat or anything like that. I don't necessarily, like going to gyms and lifting weights or running on treadmills. So, um, when about a year ago, I was starting to um, walk on a consistent basis. Here in Arizona, it's kind of hard to walk during the summertime when it's 110 degrees for 60 days in a row. You know? So the summer times are a little tough. The winter times are now it's a beautiful 75 degrees out today. So can't complain. And I was out walking, and yes, since Wednesday I've walked at least 30 minutes each day, being Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this morning. Um, and I will continue that because uh, that's what I committed to you
Yeah, I mean, if that's
and
like
to
that's
myself.
well, yes, exactly. Because it's really because so this is what I said in the other episode that we recorded that we're not using. Well, first of all, I said it's really not optional if
Yeah,
you have pulmonary fibrosis and you might get a lung transplant to not be walking. It's literally would be like the worst decision ever and go
yeah,
against everything that you're saying that you want for yourself. But then
yeah,
that brought up Debbie Ford's book, The Right Questions, where we have hidden commitments that we're unaware of in our subconscious and unconscious programming. And that's what was going on with you. There's a part of you that wants to exercise and knows you should, but then this other part of you who learned a long time ago as a kid, like as a teen, that not doing anything is better. Just shutting down and disconnecting and not doing anything is better for you. So that little part of you, the subconscious and unconscious programming is always going to be louder than any conscious part of you. But now that we brought it to light and we talked about it, it's there now. And you're like, oh no, I'm not listening to that part of myself anymore. This is
Yeah.
future RJ who's going to take care of himself and do what he needs to live as long as he can.
Yes. Yes. And I, totally agree. The take the easy path of least resistance, right? Um, but it's with the transplant team, and it's like, all right, well, I was a big marijuana smoker, and it's legal out here in Arizona, but and California, but you know, um, and so I don't smoke marijuana anymore. Because when I had the valley fever, I was coughing too much.
You literally couldn't,
I
right?
couldn't. It's just like it wasn't enjoyable. I really don't like edibles. Some people have asked me about that. Um, I don't. I really haven't been a big drinker. A few beers here and there. If I have a six pack, it'll sit in the fridge for a month or two. Um, but the transplant team asked me to, not drink, not consume alcohol, um, for the sake of the donor's family, because they want to pass their, loved ones. Organs onto a healthy recipient who will honor, the gift
Yeah.
as they,
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
yeah.
But not having any of like if you're not a gym rat, so you don't really work
Yeah.
out, so you don't get a dopamine hit like that, and
No.
you're working a lot, and that's how you
Right.
spend a lot of your time. You can't get high anymore. Can't
No.
escape that way. So we talked about this too on the last episode, that it makes it hard when you can't escape your reality, when everything is right in your face. That
Yeah.
is that is like that's what you call a spiritual crisis, when you have to deal with your emotions. You can't hide from them anymore.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm up for uh, ex- uh, exploring my spiritual side
Well,
of myself.
it's just gonna happen whether you like it or not, and doing what we're doing. But okay, so we're gonna end here soon. But what I want to know is
Yes.
just from this is our first session, but it's kind of not, because we already talked a few days ago. But just in the last few days from when we had our first conversation to
Yeah.
now, and you walking
Yes.
3 days in a row,
Yes.
I know, do you feel better now?
I do. I think, 3 days really isn't enough to, I mean, I feel good about the fact that I've walked for the last 3 days. Um, when I'm walking, I listen to your podcast and some of the episodes that you had sent me, which are, extremely powerful. Some of the people that you talk to and have, had conversations with, are inspirational. Um, so hopefully I can be an inspiration to other people.
Oh, I have no doubt that you're going to be. No doubt. Okay, so all right, well, let's wrap up this episode, and then I will see you for the next one. I'll meet with you next week. And I think next one we should maybe touch on family and
Okay.
relationships. How's
All
that
right.
sound? All
Works
right.
for me. All right.
For that. And all of this, by the way, family and relationships is tied into your health and wellness, because you
Yeah.
can't have terrible relationships and feel healthy and well. It's just not possible. Because really, relationships are about that's how we're here to learn. We can't,
Yes.
we have to learn from other people, and even learn about ourselves from other people, because the way we react to them and respond to them has more to do with you than it does the other person. It's all your subconscious and unconscious programming. So when you can get more methodical and more intentional
Yeah.
with how you respond to whether it's your coworkers, your family, other community members or whatever, it totally changes your whole experience in life, because then you're going to start attracting people that are more responsive and less reactive too. And
Okay.
it just improves your relationships.
Good. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for being here to do the first episode of the RJ experiment. And that's it. Thanks for being here, RJ.
Great. Thank you, Maureen. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, audience. I know you learned something valuable here today. See you next episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Brain BS podcast. I hope you really learned something here today that can be helpful and that you can apply to your own life. If you find it useful, I would appreciate it if you gave me a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts and shared the podcast with everyone you know, so that I can reach more people and help them to learn how to live consciously and live the life they really want. If you'd like to be on the podcast, you can email me at mkcoachllc@gmail.com or message me on Facebook. Until the next time,